Welcome to Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, where every 2 weeks we take a deep dive into everything ECNL and at times everything soccer. We do that with the CEO and president of the ECNL, Christian Lavers, their accomplished vice president, Doug Bracken, and Ashley Willis, the ECNL Partnership Activation and Alumni Relations Manager. We have a whole lot to cover on today's podcast with those three, including a recap of all the ECNL National Championships and Regional League National Championships, talking about the emotion of victory and defeat. We will cover the Conference Cup that is going on right now, the Canada Women's Olympic Team drone scandal, the search for a U.S. Men's World Cup coach, and a Bracken's Brain Buster that opens the door for us to talk about the U.S. Women's and Men's Olympic Soccer team. That's a whole lot, but I think you'll enjoy this show with Christian, Doug, and Ashley. And it all starts after this message from ECNL corporate partner, Nike.
Nike is a proud sponsor of ECNL Girls. Nothing can stop what we can do together to bring positive change to our communities. You can't stop sport because hashtag you can't stop our voices. Follow Nike on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Welcome back to Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, segment 1, ready to roll. And as mentioned, I turn it back over to the president and CEO of the ECNL, Christian Lavers.
All right. Well, thank you, Dean. Glad to see everybody back after a little hiatus last week when we heard from the great Charlie Stilitano here, recorded back at the symposium in Vegas, which was great to hear some of his stories. So the first topic we'll talk about is the ECNL finals that just concluded, boys and girls, ECNL and RL, all the data and information from that. Ashley was brave and on site for every day of both finals in the hot, humid conditions of Richmond, Virginia. So maybe Ashley, set the table and talk to us a little bit about the finals, your perspective of it, watching every level and both genders, and what you thought about the atmosphere, the teams, everything about the ECNL Finals 2024.
Yeah, I don't know if it was brave or stupidity on my end going that many games in the heat in Richmond, but I will say it was a ton of fun, a lot of good levels across the board between club comp and then down into RL. I thought it was so much fun to watch. We had epic comebacks. We had a couple of blowouts, but nothing really too earth-shattering. And then it was just overall really, really good soccer. I enjoyed it. It was my first time at finals as an employee or just as a fan of soccer in general. So my first experience couldn't have gone better. A few moments that stick out would be the comeback that the 07 U17 boys did. Surf, defending national champions, tying it up, dying seconds with the reigning player of the year, and then absolutely blow it out of the water in overtime.
That game was against Las Vegas Heat, I believe, and I think Heat scored to tie with like 15 seconds left in the 6th minute of injury time or extra time. Is that right?
Surf did, yeah. Surf tied it up. They were down 1-0, and I was right behind the goal when it happened, and I was like, this is going to be so much fun going into overtime. And of course, Surf kind of turned on a different gear that you do as defending national champions. But that was a very, very good game. That Heat team was amazing. That goalkeeper was playing lights out. So heartbreaking for them, but so fun with not having a dog in the fight to be able to watch. On the girls' side, a lot of really good soccer. I mean, they're just fun to watch top to bottom on the girls' side. The little U13s were throwing Gatorade and celebrating like grown Premier League players, which was fun because they're hitting knee slides and everything. It was just a lot of fun. It was in the rain, the girls' finals for NL. I think there was a pair of sisters. Yeah, they're twins for beach. They've each won their finals, which is just, I mean, how often does that happen? The one sister won the U17s for NL, and then the other sister won, I think it was the U15s for RL. So keeping it in the family, both sisters going home national champion is always fun. Outside of just playing, I think Nike kind of being Santa for the NL kids, the 16s and 17s, and giving away a free pair of boots is It was fun. It was a lot of fun. The facial expressions on the kids when they found out that they were getting boots from Nike, that's something that I think will like be etched in my memory for a very long time.
Question for you, Christian and Ashley.
Yes.
This goes back to that surf Las Vegas Heat game. As a coach, because both of you coached a number of games, do you remember more your victories or your crushing defeats?
Defeats by a mile. I mean, both, but like defeats, like even into college as a player, I remember 17 seconds left in a game and losing.
Yeah. So, I mean, my biggest one is we lost to US West National Final in a game I thought we played well enough to win. And that is my overwhelming memory more than any time we won, which is, I don't know if that's a sad thing, but Christian, what do you think there?
I think there's science about how emotion positively impacts memory. I mean, things that are high emotional moments sort of sear into your brain. So if it's emotionally high on one end or the other, I think it's seared into your brain, because I can think of both. I can think of those really tough moments of losses and those really unbelievable highs. And to me, they're both crystal clear because they were so emotional in either excitement or sorrow or whatever. Yeah. But that game you're talking about in the 17s, when you're leading and you concede that late, that is soul crushing. And it's easy because the game's tied, but you almost feel like you lost. And so it's not a surprise to some level that the team that concedes very, very late at the end the emotions overwhelm them. And it's really hard to get back into sort of that proactive, confident mentality because you feel like it was just taken from you, so late.
My overwhelming emotion when Ashley was explaining that game was how my heart sank for Las Vegas Heat, honestly, more than I thought about San Diego Surf and how excited they were to come back and win. So I don't know. I might need to talk to my therapist about all this.
I mean, it was so late to like paint the actual picture of how late this tying goal was, is our videographer was on the Heat bench filming them and their reactions ready to come off the bench. Like that's how late this tying goal was. So it was, Dean, you were calling the game. Like it was very, very fun if you didn't have a dog in the fight, but like my heart sank for those Heat kids.
It was one of the most exciting games I've called in a long, long time. And you knew when last year's Player of the Year scored it, you knew that Captain momentum was on their side and they were going to get it done. So it was really heartbreak city on the other side for the Vegas Heat because they were, as you said, just that many seconds away from winning a national championship and had it just plucked right away from them.
Well, and huge credit to the guys to get to that final and to be in that spot. So it's a huge accomplishment, and they'll see and feel that everybody who loses, whether you lose in the quarters, semis, or in the championship, there's a sort of bitter feeling at first, but in time, you'll look back and recognize what an unbelievable accomplishment it is to get to that point. Because I think when you look at year over year, it is so hard to repeat as champions. And the teams that have, and you can probably count them on one hand, no more than two, but probably one hand on teams that have had back-to-back championships. When you can do that, it is an incredible feat because it's not unusual that for year over year, you will have 90% or 100% difference in who makes it to the championship game and who makes it to the semis, because there's just so much quality and depth out there. So kudos to everybody on site for making it that far, for the quality that it takes. The other part to this is the dominance in both sides, and generally, I think almost at both levels from the Southwest and specifically Southern California this year. I mean, so the Southern California is the biggest player hotbed in the country in terms of numbers, quality, and maybe we talk about how that impacts this, but their performance in terms of getting to the finals and winning finals across many different clubs was maybe unprecedented this year. Doug, you got the data on that, I think.
Yeah. In the girls specifically, 5 out of the 6 champions at the ECNL level were teams from Southern California. And at the RL level, 4 out of the 5 teams that won were Southern California. The boys is more competitive and a little bit more spread out. But you had at the ECNL level, you had 3 out of the 6 were Southern California. None of the RL champions came from Southern California, so the boys RL, I guess, saved a little bit on that front. But on the girls' side, to say that, of the 11 championships that we were playing for in Richmond, 9 of them were won by teams from Southern California. It's a pretty big statement this year. 3 of the finals at the ECNL level were contested to Southern California teams.
So let's give these clubs that won the championships some credit, and the teams in the finals. Maybe just go through quickly each age group.
Yeah, U13 girls ECNL Surf, San Diego Surf beat SoCal Blues. U14 was Slammers beat Legends. U15 was San Diego Surf beat KC Athletics. U16 was Penn Fusion as the champion over Crossfire Academy out of Seattle. U17 Beach FC beat Legends. And then at U19, San Diego Surf beat Concord. Obviously, that U19 game was at the playoffs because we finished there. But big hats off to San Diego Surf. They did win the overall club championship, and they had 3 national champions, which is...
I think if you win 3 national championships, that's like the most obvious unannounced crown.
Yeah,
ever.
Totally. And then on the girls RL U13s, it was SoCal Blues over Solar. U14, it was Beach FC over Connecticut FC. U15, it was Beach FC against Westside Alliance. And then U16, Greater Toledo FC won over Sting Dallas Black. And then at U17, Legends beat Albion. So that was the girls' side.
Just to put that in a little perspective for those who might not know the geography, when you talk about Surf, Slammers, Legends, Beach, and Blues, you could probably drive from one club to the other club in an hour or an hour and a half and get from any one of those clubs to the other. And some of them might actually be just a few exits down the road. I might be wrong. Some might even train on the same facilities at certain days of the week. And don't quote me on that, but like the proximity of those clubs to each other is really, really close.
I think what you also particularly see there in the girls' side is that the younger age groups, were really dominant this year. On the boys' side, it's a bit more spread out. And so at the ECNL level, U13 Pipeline beat Real Colorado. At U14, LAFC SoCal beat the Dallas Texans. At U15, South Carolina Surf beat Pipeline. U16, LAFC SoCal beat NVA out of Northern Virginia. U17, San Diego Surf beat Las Vegas Heat Surf, which we've kind of already talked about. At U19, it was Crossfire Academy beat Florida Craze. And then at the RL level, U13s, it was SF United over Delaware SC. U14, Three Rivers over GSA. U15 was the Philadelphia Ukrainians over Chicago Inter. U16, Kansas Rush over Doral. And at U17, a couple of Midwest teams, SLSG over FC Wisconsin. So that was kind of that. And on the boys' side, the overall club champion was Crossfire Academy. So congratulations to them in Surf. I always say this, that is the hardest achievement in our league, is to be the overall club champion. Takes into consideration your points from what you do in conference play, the playoffs, and the finals. So it's an unbelievable accomplishment to be the overall club champion. So congrats to those guys.
So that's the teaser. That announcement hasn't been made yet, but we'll announce probably in the next month here the top 20. I think we typically announce the top 20 clubs overall. Nobody's going to be surprised by those champions. Kudos to all them. Begs the question, if you go back, maybe this is the most dominant year ever for the Southwest Conference. I'm guessing that's the case on the girls' side for sure. Slammers has, last year's overall club champ, Surf this year's overall club champ, and the numbers of teams in the finals. But, every year the Southwest Conference proves its quality on both sides, girls and boys. And it begs the question as to why is that conference so consistently dominant. And I think it's probably fair to say that most years the Southwest Conference ranks out as the top competition on both sides. I'll throw this open to both of you. Why do you think that is?
Geography and weather would be the two things that I think about. When you are generally not limited by the weather and as it relates to your training, and not whether or not you can train, but the circumstances under which you're training. So and I'm sure you would agree with this, Christian, because you could talk about how it was when you were in Wisconsin, and obviously now you're in San Diego, so you see it from two different lenses. But here, like, we train outside in the winter, but it's 25 degrees, and the kids aren't necessarily, locked in when they're out there freezing their butts off, right? So it's a hard, and that's not an excuse. It's just a fact, right? That sometimes the weather can be very prohibitive. I think you and I always kind of talked about how you guys spent 3 or 4 months inside of a gym training, and there's got to be an advantage to being able to train in good weather without a lot of restriction.
I think weather for sure, climate is a piece of it. Although I will say, you don't win at that level without doing a good job coaching as well. And so we got to make sure that that's really, really clear. I always used to say you're never going to be successful at a high level if you don't have both a sort of raw material or really good talent, plus a really good job of organizing and teaching that talent. Weather is certainly one piece. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if you've never trained consistently in 25 degrees, one of the things you recognize is that you can't do as much teaching in 25 degrees, because if you stop to show points and talk through things, everybody starts to freeze. Right. So when I remember training sessions where you say, hey, we're going to be outdoors, and the first thing we got to do here is keep everybody moving. That's a different, and by the way, the more you're training and less standing, the better, obviously, but there's a different challenge to that. When the cones break, I don't know, Ashley, if you've actually done that.
No, she lives in Florida.
The plastic is frozen and breaks.
I grew up in Colorado.
She lives in Florida.
Training in the cold.
Colorado cold is not Midwest cold, man.
Totally.
It's not, but I mean, come on.
Totally.
But, and to your other point, I mean, so Texas is another conference that's typically very, very competitive, that has similarities with weather. And the Southeast, you have some, big clubs. NASA Top Hat on the boys' side for sure, Concord on both sides, that have been consistent. FKK this year, obviously in the 18th final. There is a reality to the climate as far as it impacts the ability to be outside. I'll say one thing as well is that, having sort of lived through this change, as obvious as it may be, when you're outdoors a lot more just in life, I got to think it impacts like the athleticism of kids. Because when you're outdoors and you can do things and you're playing around versus being stuck inside, your body's presented with different demands. So I think that's a piece of it. The other side of it is the density of talent.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's Southern California, one of the most densely populated places in the country. And I think when you combine the density of talent, the ability to be outside all the time, probably a pretty athletic culture, that gives you some pretty big macroeconomic, I guess you would say, or macro variables that are going to help. And then if you put good people working with those players and teams in terms of teaching and organizing, you're going to be tough to beat. And I think that's what we saw this year.
Yeah, I think these big geographic centers around the country where you have a higher concentration of talent, to your point, and you can get that talent in the same environment, it raises the level. And again, that's not to take anything away from coaching or organizing and how they develop their players and their teams. But, when you have that, I think, concentration of talent, and that cultivates a level of competition and increasing the level, that makes a huge difference. Ashley could chime in on this too. At times when you have a good player or two really good players who are well above other players, it can be hard for those guys to push on to the next level because they're not being tested every day, or it doesn't force them to be tested because of the way that they, how they're just at a higher level. If you have 6 or 8 of those players or 10 of those types of players on a team, it makes a big difference in how they
the wider
push
the range of talent, the harder it is. I have another question actually yet for Ashley, because the immediate response to, hey, the Southern California's got some weather and population advantages is, so does Florida, right? To a degree, very densely populated, similar. I mean, probably a lot more humidity in Florida than SoCal, but Florida is a very, very different soccer market. And I remember when we got the first U.S. club league in Florida, the Florida Club League, and shout out to them and Lori Troutman and their leadership, because they've grown that from zero to a lot of players and a really good platform right now. But when that happened, we used to always say Florida has so much talent, but it's not aggregated into teams and clubs as much. Florida, we always kind of looked at it as like the Wild West. And I think if you talk to some of the directors there who are good friends, so you got Sean Bubb at Florida Elite, Hugh Menzies, FKK, Novi and his brother at Florida Premier, Trisha at
Ashley
Tampa.
Willis.
Ashley Willis proudly leading the RL program down there. But I think the evolution of the club soccer infrastructure in Florida is happening. But you're there, Ashley. The sense over time has been that Florida has had good teams, but not well-organized clubs. If I go back 10, 15 years ago, and this is no disrespect to anybody who's been in that Florida club scene, but it was just a lot harder to organize for whatever reason. And I think that's slowly starting to change, which again is a credit here to the clubs in Southern California, because these are big, well-organized clubs. Again, whether you're talking about Surf or Slammers or Legends or Beach or SoCal or Pateadores or any of these guys, and you could go on and on and on, but they're well-organized. They're very deep. What is the Florida market? I mean, you can look at it now, actually, from a player, from a coach now, having seen some stuff from a league perspective. How do you contrast the Florida market to the Southern California market?
Yeah, I think there's like a couple of big differences. Yeah, we're dense here in Florida, but not like it is in Southern California. Like, it's dense, but it's spread out. It's very strange here. I didn't grow up here, so I'm still trying to learn it after a few years of living here. But I think our talent is very spread out, from Miami to the Panhandle to Jacksonville to Orlando to Tampa. It's just vastly spread out compared to Southern California, where you throw a nickel out the window and you hit 17 national team kids in Southern California, where here it's few and far between. As far as the organization of clubs, yeah, I think there's a blueprint in Southern California that everyone tries to emulate. And it's this works, and this is why we need to be similar to this club, and we can tweak it within the difference between Slammers and SoCal Blues and Surf. But here it's people are set in their ways in a lot of ways of like, this is why we've done it this way always. I don't really necessarily want to change. And then you have to get new people in, directors, coaches, leadership in general. And then you can start developing, your entire program differently. But I think in Florida, it's just this is the way we've always done it. And we had success for a couple of years, 15 years ago, and it should be the same now. And that's not the case. And I think you're slowly starting to see this new wave of people come in and start changing the landscape in Florida. But I don't think it's always been that way. And I think that's kind of why there's such a vast difference in Florida versus California, which on paper, there really shouldn't be.
There were two things that always used to be said, about Florida. One was, and I remember back in the Development Academy boys days, there was a common refrain of playing a Florida team in Florida was going to be very different than playing a Florida team on the road.
Yep.
In terms of the players that were there. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, and I don't know the specifics of this, but I was always told it was a lot easier to just start a new club in Florida than it was in most places. And so there was a little bit of, whenever something didn't go the way somebody wanted, it was pretty easy to take your ball, go home, start a new club. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually been one of the things that probably, and again, you should give credit to the Florida Club League for trying to provide an infrastructure to create a club-based system. And you go back to some of our other podcasts talking about why we do club-based leagues versus team-based leagues, is the ability to manage quality, be efficient in operations, and try and provide a more clear pathway within an organization. And I'm not talking about ECNL, I'm talking about within a club. That does help to consolidate players at smaller variances of talent. And I think Florida, for whatever reason, it's been a late to the game on that, but I think it's catching up fast. I mean, FKK being in the national championship game, and that may be the first Florida boys team that was in a final.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure on that.
I will also say Florida Premier did have a good playoffs at the boys. They didn't make it to a national final. It does seem like, as you look at it, that
I think they had a girls team there too, as well, or one or two girls teams in the
they're
finals.
07s. They're 07s at Florida Premier across the border. They're very.
It does feel like the boys are on Florida a little bit ahead, but to your point, I do think they are starting to get more organized, right? Which I think has always been the knock.
What's always interesting in Florida in general, you don't see, I don't know if I can think of one club, including my own off the top of my head, that is talented on both the boys and the girls side. You look at surf, it's dominant, both boys and girls. There's FC Dallas, boys and girls. There's Solar, boys and girls. There's Real Colorado, boys and girls. But you look at any club in Florida, you're either a very good girls program or a very good boys program. There's not any that can probably argue top to bottom on both girls and boys. That is just like that club dominates everyone here.
Well, I think Florida Premier would probably raise their hand and argue with you on this year, but I think generally
not allowed to support now. I would say Florida Premier, but their age groups still. I mean, they either are very good at the younger ones or very good at the older. It's changing a little bit, but even then they kind of, I mean, in the Tampa area, I'd give it to them, but I don't know if across the state they have every age group. Kind of like I'm comparing directly to a surf.
Yeah. Well, and you see Florida is very tumultuous soccer landscape right now in all sorts of ways. So you add these sort of evolutions of clubs, and I think Tampa is an interesting market. You know, there's a really big rivalry between Florida Premier and Tampa Bay United. We hope that rivalry stays very friendly. You have these club evolutions going on, similar in Orlando and Jacksonville and Southern Florida, which is even more sort of chaotic. And you also have a variety of different league pathways. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years with Florida, because I think if you go back 10 years, it was a very different landscape in Florida than maybe most of the rest of the country. Now it's consolidating more and more and more, and you're starting to see more of this happen. So anyway, it's sort of a long tangent of going from
I was going to say, when are we going to break down Cincinnati soccer scene for the people, Christian, or the Milwaukee, Wisconsin soccer scene?
Yeah, I think we got a much smaller audience, for those markets.
Bring your pillow and your blanket.
All right. So, hey, congrats to everybody on the finals. Unbelievable year. We'll be wrapping up the year. It's obviously over now from a competition perspective. Last event of the year, 2024 Conference Cup. So we'll give you a little preview on that and talk about what the Conference Cup is and why we do it, and maybe open some questions about the future and that program.
Great segue, Christian, as we'll do just that after this message from an ECNL corporate partner.
Soccer.com is proud to partner with the ECNL to support the continued development of soccer in the U.S. at the highest levels. We've been delivering quality soccer equipment and apparel to players, fans, and coaches since 1984. Living and breathing the beautiful game ourselves, our goal at Soccer.com is to inspire you to play better, cheer louder, and have more fun. Visit Soccer.com today to check out our unmatched selection of gear, expert advice, and stories of greatness at every level of the game.
Welcome back to Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast. Once again, here's Christian Labers.
All right, so we're talking now about 2024 Conference Cup. Really cool. Last year was the first year of the Conference Cup, so brief overview. Last year was about 90 players boys, 90 players girls, different age groups, but some of the best in the country brought together, put onto geographically oriented teams for some mini game competition down at Chula Vista at the former Olympic Training Center. Unbelievable setting, Southern California again. Last year we had a videography crew that followed the boys program around because the boys program was a little older on site than the girls. And that documentary, about 15, 20 minutes or so, was released last night. So we're recording this on July 26th on YouTube, really following the journey of a couple of kids, specifically within the Conference Cup, but kind of trying to show what it's like to play within the ECNL Really, really cool documentary. So if you get a chance, go watch it, and you get a little inside look at what these kids are doing. But the Conference Cup is our program to try and provide some additional opportunity for and reward for top level players to play in a unique environment, best on best, with players they normally don't play with across multiple clubs, to some degree across multiple age groups, because there's usually a mix of two age groups within the Conference Cup, and occasionally maybe a younger player than that. But in an environment that is not really offered in most soccer programming, was really cool last year. And you can, like I said, you can see that in the documentary. We're doing it on both boys and girls. Boys Conference Cup kicks off on Monday, the 29th. And the girls, I believe, is the following Monday, the 5th of August. So we'll have that again, and really cool opportunity. We still are trying to figure out exactly what the best way to reward these top level players and teams is. It's a growing conversation within the league, I think, about what can the ECNL offer either on an individual basis for top talent, on a club basis for the very top clubs who are consistently competing at the top levels. Conference Cup was our evolution from the national training camp, which was at Nike for 10 years. Was great last year. I think it's going to be a great experience this year. And then what the future is for that program, specifically how we structure it, I think that's still up for debate. We're committed to continuing to add value, opportunities, experiences for top level players. And we talk a lot about the 99% and the 1%. And there's a lot of things that are the same, but there are differences in terms of what does a 1% need or merit versus the 99. And that's true, no matter where you sort of look at that level, whether it's ECNL or soccer landscape more broadly. I don't know, Doug, what are your thoughts on Conference Cup and that sort of player ID, top level player experience?
The national training camp, when we did it, it was at Nike. And then the one year we did it in Portland, away from Nike, but we integrated with Paris Saint-Germain and Man City's women's teams. They came over and had a training camp, which was an unbelievable experience. It was really kind of a special event, like unbelievable. We had the best players from our league there at the older age groups, which is exactly, the representation of the best in our league. And then it kind of just ran its course. And I'll put it back on you on your opinion on what you think it is. I think what happened is, the youth national team calendar just got more busy. And so these top players were called more frequently into these national camps. And so it kind of pushed our national training camp down the priority list, maybe for our top players. And so, we felt like it was just time to change to something different and make it more competitive and maybe have representation from different regions of the country and then play each other and have a winner. So, I think it's a really cool concept. I think what happens is on the girls' side is the calendar is it's busy, it's packed. And we have people playing so many different high school seasons and then their club season. And it's just you can only, at what point do the players just rest and rejuvenate themselves? On the boys' side, I would say totally different. And the need for it and how great it is for our boys' side it's a great event. And you can see that. You talk to Jason Cutney, our commissioner, and he talks and raves about how great it is. And we get a chance again to get our best of the best together and play in a competitive format. So I like the format. I think in theory, it's a great way to do it. The reality is maybe on the girls' side, there's just not, is it time to evolve because there's just so much that you're trying to put in to a year. It just becomes a little bit harder. I don't know what your thoughts are about it. I know you're asking me my thoughts, but I think that's why we kind of evolved to this format to try to make it something different, a little bit more special, put some, regions against each other for some bragging rights, still recognizing the very best players in our league.
If you zoom out on the whole player ID space, it has changed a lot. When we first did the national training camp, nothing like that was out. And by the way, the cost of that camp, everything but transportation, is covered. right? So that the intent is that the players come there, and beyond the flight to get into the airport, every other landed cost, food, accommodation, ground transport, staff, equipment, facilities, all that stuff is covered. But when we did that first at Nike, nobody was really doing that. To your point, there weren't as many national team age groups or camps. And if you fast forward then 10 years, this is probably where the landscape is the most fragmented, because we've talked about in the past that from a competition level, the best players are within ECNL. On the boys' side, you look at ECNL and MLS, and that's where it is. But if you look at all the different quote unquote player ID opportunities out there, we used to call them PDP as well, where we did them conference based.
Yeah.
And we found that over time, that the return on that from a player experience or player impact was hard to justify, to do something one time a year, which is what we did in each conference. But you have players that go and do ID, quote unquote, under a variety of different sanctioning bodies, whether it's, you have your U.S. youth futsal stuff, you have talent ID run by various different leagues, you have talent ID run by U.S. soccer, you have ODP run by U.S. youth, you have ID2 run by, U.S. club. And it's sort of just that space, and saying that what we believe is that there's a value to providing unique experiences for high level players in a different type of environment, right? Mixed teams, mixed age groups, maybe competition or training formats, something like that. How to do that in a way that is not crowding the calendar, whether that is individual based or it leans a little more towards club. Those are the things that we're constantly talking about. We're having conversations, conversation with Doug Landefeld about it yesterday, but we're having conversations all the time. And I think it's going to be a growing conversation about the role of a league in that sort of spot versus the role of a sanctioning body or a role of the federation.
The prevalence of college ID camps has also exploded in the last 3 to 5 years. And that's just another thing where these top kids are going and doing something that is kind of ID-ish, right? So
yeah, no, and listen,
factor.
I'll back up, a little first principles thinking here, but generally the best kids play the most soccer. And, before somebody starts banging the drum on specialization, and can sort of debunk a lot of popular arguments on that if we really wanted to get into that in the future. And obviously there's a need for a rest time and a recovery time, and the length or frequency of that would vary by age. But generally, the best kids play the most soccer. Having a variety of different ways and places to play soccer is not a bad thing. And, I've been using the phrase recently that soccer at any level is good for soccer. So we look at this and saying, hey, for these kids who want more and who can be uniquely challenged or uniquely exposed to certain new challenges, this is a really good thing. The question is just, what is it? What is the best way to do that? And, as we said, we've evolved from the national training camp to now the Conference Cup. My gut is that that'll continue to evolve in that programming because there's value to the programming, but it is hard to pinpoint exactly what the best way to do and that is. But actually, we've both said, Ashley, we want your opinion. So now we need to stop talking.
I agree. I think the best players do play the most soccer. I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's important to know that, just because you're invited to these things, these training centers, these ID clinics, all of these different things around the country, doesn't mean you have to go to every single one. So parents are often banging the drum of burnout.
Yeah.
The kids who are going to our Conference Cup, not every single one was just in Richmond. Not every single one was just in Seattle. Some kids have been off since May. So going to something end of June, beginning of August, or end of July, beginning of August is going to be okay for them, where people just have to have honest conversations of what they want out of soccer, what their hopes, dreams, aspirations are, and how those align with what they are capable physically of doing.
Yeah. So you're making a point that it's very individualized, which, is obvious, but it's a great point to make that. And this is, again, there are people who want to impose standards, and I put my quotes in the air, that generally apply to everybody. But if you look at soccer development, it is ultimately individual, nonlinear. right? And so managing the load and the calendar shouldn't be a team thing. I mean, even if you talk about periodization, you talk about individual periodization within the team, right? It should be an individual thing about what does this player need? What is the load and the fatigue on this player versus the opportunity? We always have to be focused on the individual impact and not make generalities and default to standards and, dead periods that are universal for everybody, because a universal period is appropriate for nobody individually, right?
It's important for us as a league to give kids all the opportunities in the world to prove themselves, to play as much as possible, to play with the best kids in the country. But an opportunity doesn't mean you have to take it.
Yeah.
Right.
Years back, and again, you go back, we've learned so much, but if you go back to the creation of the Boys DA 2007, one of the principles, underlying that, and somebody I'm sure will argue, but I think there'd be plenty of people that would also agree, was that, these top players need to be in a top environment and a tough environment, and every day is iron sharpens iron. I hate that phrase. I've said that on multiple podcasts. I'll continue to say that. A lot of us bought into that, and there is some truth to, you need a daily competitive environment. But at the same time, the corollary to that was like playing in a less competitive environment was adverse to your development. It was negative for your potential to take your foot off the gas and be in a place where maybe you weren't going to get punished for every mistake, as a player or as a team. And, I would say I've reversed my opinion on that 180 degrees, especially with respect to youth, which is, yes, more often than not, do you want a competitive environment that's challenging and where there is huge demands?
Where iron sharpens iron.
Yeah. Where they're reasonably stretch goals. I guess we'll call them stretch goals. Yes, you do. But is it bad to have moments and places where you take a step back and where maybe the consequences aren't as high or the challenges aren't as high and there's a little bit of relief? No, actually, I think it's really important to have those moments, actually, especially with respect to youth, because if everything is iron sharpens iron 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 10 years in a row, you're going to have a lot of kids that, they're not going to have fun. So I think that's another piece in this is people play soccer and have different experiences because they want different experiences. So we try and figure all of that out here when we're saying, okay, what do we do in this player ID space? What do we do to provide unique opportunities and experiences, recognizing that the existence of a variety of different programs is not a bad thing, as long as each one is offering, a positive outcome, obviously. But it's an interesting space. I'm sure we'd have a ton of opinions here of people who have gone into any one of these programs and have good experiences or bad experiences or whatever. But it goes back to your point, Ashley. It's very individual.
A great conversation about the Conference Cup and all its merits. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about the Canadian women's soccer team drone scandal. Can you believe it? We'll talk about it after this message from yet another ECNL corporate partner.
From athletes just starting to turn heads to some of the best athletes to ever play their games, Gatorade shows that they are the proven fuel of the best. For the athletes who give everything, nothing beats Gatorade, the studied, tested, and proven fuel of the ECNL.
We are right in the middle of the Canadian drone scandal. We don't know what's going on there. We're not going to cast aspersions on anybody. Everybody likes to jump to conspiracy theories and criticize and attack everybody, but it is interesting because if you're at the playoffs and any field goes into PKs, if your club is about to play the team that's in PKs the game before you, somebody from your staff is sprinting over to that field to write down where every PK is going and who's shooting. We have a video exchange so that there's film of all the games, and all of that is pretty kosher and accepted. I don't know where the line is between watching existing PKs and flying unmanned aircraft over blacked out fences. What do you guys think about this Canadian scandal? And again, this is pure conjecture.
Yeah. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing flying a drone?
Amen.
Over an opponent's training session? What are you doing? It's the, Patriots secretly filming other people's practices. What are you doing? I think at that level, the margins are really fine, and having some knowledge about something from a scouting perspective whether it be set play organization, which could be happening at that training session while that drone is over there, or some tactical adjustment that they're making to try to account for whatever, in this case,
let me ask this question,
Canada's doing. Yeah, go.
Let me ask this question. Let's take away the drone ethics. Does it really make a difference?
Yeah.
I mean, are you saying you can't find the PK shooters of these players? These players are national team players. They take PKs for their clubs. Like, you're going to find out how they take PKs. You don't need a drone to see how they take PKs.
Yeah, it makes a difference because we just stated, listen, at the youth level, see, this is where I'm
saying you're going to find the PK information without a drone.
I hear you, but is it the PK ish? Is it like they're working on their set play organization and movement or whatever? At that level, the margins are small. And the difference between winning, losing, tying can be thin, can be a set play, how you defend it, how you execute it. And so to have some advanced information on a team that you've gathered kind of unfairly and very secretively, it's BS.
I mean, I'm with Doug. Like, what are we doing? But also at the same time, it's not like it's football, like American football, where you're running different plays and you need to see how defensively you're going to organize. Like, soccer is a very fluid game, but from a defensive, like, tactical standpoint of defending set pieces, I can understand it. If, like, if you're doing something unique that day, like, I think that's the only reason you're flying a drone, is you want to see how defensively they're setting up or offensively you're setting up. And I saw the best tweet about it because they got scored on off of a set piece, and they were like, you flew drones and you still got beat off of that. And it was like the best tweet I've seen about all of this.
Yes, Dean.
Yeah, it's cheating. It's flat out cheating. There's livelihoods on the line, and it all flows downhill, and it's unacceptable in any form. I don't care, penalty kicks, whatever. It's unacceptable in any form. That's
to be clear, I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing about, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, somebody's cheating to do this. Like, are you getting, violating, let's just say, all the norms and ethics and whatever? Is the information you're getting worth the risk you're taking? And I would argue, I hear what you're saying, Doug.
Let me ask you this. You are the manager of Manchester United.
Nice. An American manager of Manchester United.
There you go.
This.
You are the manager of Manchester United.
So I'm Ted Lasso.
Let's bring it back.
I'm Ted Lasso. I believe.
Let's
Doug.
bring it home. You are the manager of FC Cincinnati.
No. Man United, man.
Come on. Why are you casting?
Because if we're going to shoot for the stars, we're going to shoot high.
Well, then we wouldn't be talking about Man United. I can promise you that. So, but not right now. Okay, so you are the manager of Real Madrid.
Oh, even better. I don't even speak Spanish.
And you are getting ready for El Clasico. And I am a staff member of Barcelona, and I am flying a drone over your training sessions. You cool with that?
See, I'm going to do counter intel.
Because you lose to Barcelona, you could get fired.
Because I'm going to have some sort of ground to air radar to know that the drone is there. And then I'm going to do counter set pieces, which is fake set pieces, fake formation. See where this is going? Like, now I'm messing with you.
Okay, now this tells me you might someday be the manager of Real Madrid with this kind of genius thinking that you've done.
I appreciate that. And you know what? If that's the case, if any of you guys speak Spanish, you could be my translator, and then your career could end up being like Mourinho. And now we bring it all back circle.
Wow, that's a smack on Mourinho.
Well, Mourinho started as a translator.
No question about it. Yeah, I agree with Dean 100%. This is cheating.
It is cheating.
It's cheating. We can't be okay with cheating. Does it matter how much it matters? How much of an advantage you gain or don't gain by inflating or deflating the footballs?
I just wonder how many youth clubs have a drone in their budget.
Probably, yeah. There's somebody out there.
Every time we're at an event,
I'm going to start looking around the fields here in Southern California. There's all these really good clubs out here. I'm going to start looking for drones everywhere now.
Yeah.
Do you know how quick we call each other at an event if we see a drone over the field? There was one at playoffs, and it was in the middle of the field, like 30 yards up. And we're like,
here's what I'll say about youth soccer scouting. I believe that I got to worry about what my team is doing. We got a bunch of youth players. It's hard enough trying to get them on the same page. I'm not even worried about what you're doing. So I think that's different. I think at the pro level, but people will disagree with me on that. I don't think scouting plays as big of a role at the youth level.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. Now, we'll find out what happens here. How big is this scandal?
Well, I mean, the coach of Canada got thrown out of the Olympics.
Well, I get
the
that.
head coach.
Well, didn't the guy who got caught, isn't he like supposedly getting jail time?
All right, well,
because
this is where I don't think there's any laws being broken. This is where we need to shut this convo down. Say we do not know. Pure conjecture. I'm sure there will be some really, really good investigative journalism on DroneGate.
We do have to talk 5 minutes about the U.S. men's national team managerial search. We do. Don't you think we have to talk about it a little bit? Those 5 minutes.
Here's what I'd say about this. First thing was, as soon as the change was made, and let's stay away from the change and just talk about the future. It's an open seat. My first comment is, of course, it's like everybody on Twitter, because of course X knows everything, was go get Jurgen Klopp, right? And say, why wouldn't you take a moonshot for Jurgen Klopp? And one of the debates was, well, he wants a break from soccer from 6 months. And my argument to that is like, hey man, it's the national team. What do they have in 6 months? Like 2 camps? If he wants a break from 6 months and doesn't want to start coaching again until 2025, I'd say, cool. It's Jurgen Klopp. His style.
As a Liverpool fan, I would say I would go at his word. He said he will likely not manage again, ever.
Yeah. I guess what I'm raising is the question between a national team and a club team. A club team where you have them every single day. You can have huge impact and style of play, player development and growth. You can be a lot more detailed. And a national team where you're having players come in for a week or two at a time, a couple of camps a year. I don't think it's anywhere near the same job. In theory, even the profile of the manager. I think you can have a different type of manager that could be successful at a national team that may not be as successful at a club level. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. What's the profile of the person? I think the first thing people would ask is American coach versus foreign coach.
I'm going to go back to Dane, because Dane, you were the press officer in '94 for U.S. Soccer when Bora Milutinovic was the coach. Automatically qualified to the World Cup. 2026, we're automatically qualifying for the World Cup. You had insider access to that camp, or as well, to that team at multiple camps, tournaments. What's your thought?
It was an amazing experience for me because I was right out of college. And one day, Franz Beckenbauer's walking around, and he was a guy they considered very, very deeply to be the national team coach. I don't think I'm breaking any news right now by saying that. And, he's a massive name, like some of the names that you're talking about in Klopp and some of the other ones. And then next thing you know, Bora, who it wasn't like he was a small name. He took Mexico really far in the '86 World Cup and, had a name, and then he had the ability to speak multiple languages. But I think his personality fit the occasion. It was the first time the World Cup was ever here. He was a guy that was going to be able to interact with the media and interact with the players in the right way. Sometimes they didn't know exactly where they stood, but I think that was good because he kept it down to the wire on who was going to make the final team. So to me, somebody like Bora, and I know it's a different team, but somebody that fits that mold, which means that, kind of gets me leaning to an international name, but maybe not one that is as strict or rigid as some of the other names you say. And not to say that they're strict and rigid, but they do have certain reputations. I don't know who that guy is, but being in that spot and then seeing how it worked out for Bora, man, if they could rinse and repeat that in some way and let him sprinkle that magic dust and, have us beat Colombia and get through and play Brazil. And, we should have beat Brazil. We were up a man. That's kind of where I'm leading. Does that make any sense at all?
I would say yes. Bringing in a foreign manager who has never interacted with the American culture or the players in America, I'm not sure I'm on that train.
Well, let's divide, Doug, though, because what's the fundamental job of the national team head coach is to
win, coach
the national team to win. So
right.
I think it gets messed up was then you start saying, well, now we're going to bring in this guy and he's going to implement this change across the American soccer system. And there's going to be the USA way, which, by the way, is like the Belgian way, cross out Belgium and put USA. And then it's the French way and cross out France and put USA, or whatever it is when that typically happens. let's call this what it is, which is somebody brought in to work with one pool of players for a defined period of time to win a certain number of games. And I think if you look at it just from that, it's probably a very different decision matrix than if we're saying, hey, this person is going to be in charge of U.S. soccer from a technical perspective. Does that make sense?
It seems like the U.S. has deeply wanted to, had a deep desire in their last several hires to do exactly what you said they're not doing, which is change the culture of the national team and have an American way of playing. I don't know that I would say that they've brought in people. I mean, I'm sure they want to win, but they wanted to implement some style way of playing, sometimes to our detriment, right? Don't you think?
I mean, we'll look at it this way. Look at Spain, right? Spain, one of the most successful men's or women's, right? National teams now. And you have in Spain, you have Barcelona and their style, which by the way is changing now that Pep is further and further in the rearview mirror. But that style of Barcelona 10 years ago is not Barcelona now. You have Real Madrid, which is very, very different. You have Atletico Madrid, which is very, very different.
Yeah.
And then if you were to pick the next sort of traditional power place is the Basque country and the Basque clubs, which solve the problems very differently. So if you look within Spain, I think you'd have a hard time arguing there's a Spanish way. You would say Barcelona has a way, Madrid has a way, Atletico has a way. They make it work when all those players come together. And to the degree there is a quote unquote Spanish way, you might argue that the Spain that won the Euros and the World Cup 8 years ago was really a Barcelona way with a few Madrid players.
Heavily Pep influence.
Right. And then
even
now
though he didn't coach the team, right?
Right. So let's take that same sort of perspective here. And you say, okay, well, you've got whatever number, 30 MLS clubs. You've got all the players playing all over the world in different European leagues or South American leagues. If you put a USA way, who's doing the USA way on a daily basis? Because to your previous example, FC Cincinnati's not. They're doing the FC Cincinnati way.
Correct.
You know, and when Pulisic is at Milan, he's not doing the USA way. He's doing the Milan way.
I do think there is something to the idea that a coach that understands the culture. I think when we've been most successful, and Dean, you were close to it, when we've been most successful or had most successful results in these major tournaments, it was we identified as a certain American way. You know, you think about, was it 2002 when we made it to the quarterfinals and should have beaten Germany? We were the better team on the day. I wouldn't say we're better than Germany. There was a real mentality and kind of grit to that team that
within
defined,
that group of players.
Yeah, that I think kind of defines what you would say as the American kind of drive and all that. So I don't know. I just think someone who has no connection to the U.S. whatsoever and no experience in it, I'm just not sure about that. I think these teams that do really well at the international level obviously have great players first and foremost, but they're coached by people from their countries. They are. Argentina right now, Brazil in their heyday, Spain. I mean, Spain's not hiring a foreign coach.
No, I think, listen, I understand that argument. I guess I would just zoom out again and say it's about picking 20 players or whatever the roster is, having very clear guidelines for this is what they believe and this is how they are going to play. That group of 20. And part of that is probably, determined by selection. Part of that is then determined by discipline of decision making and sort of what's allowed and not. I just don't know that it has to go beyond that. It doesn't have to go into a bigger, hey, this is a whole ecosystem changing hire, because by the way, we've been through that, man. We've seen that in spades, whether it's coaching education or national teams or whatever. Every 5 years, it's a new philosophy.
Yeah.
Project separate
2030.
Now we got Project 2026, right?
Yeah.
See how that goes.
We've covered a lot of topics, and yet we still have Doug Bracken's Bracken Brainbuster. We'll bring you that after one more message from an ECNL corporate partner. The ECNL is pleased to announce Quick Goal as the official goal provider and partner for ECNL Girls and ECNL Boys, a new partnership created to support the growth and development of the country's top players, clubs, and coaches. At all national events, including national playoffs and national finals, the Quick Goal Coaches Corner will provide hospitality and social space for ECNL Girls, ECNL Boys, and collegiate coaches. Quick Goal will also be the presenting sponsor of the National Championship winning ECNL Girls and ECNL Boys Coaches of the Year and the ECNL Girls and ECNL Boys Goals of the Year. Quick Goal looks forward to helping the ECNL continue to elevate the standards of youth soccer and provide more opportunities to players on and off the field in the coming years. Back to wrap up this edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast. And as always, we end with Doug Bracken's Bracken Brainbuster. Take it away, Doug.
Here we go. In honor of the Olympics starting, and we did this kind of for the Euros. So we'll do this for the Olympics. The question today, Bracken's Brainbuster, is what sport or event are you most looking forward to in the Olympics? What will capture your interest the most in watching? Dean gets mad when I say first, but he hasn't gone first in a few times now. So
hold on,
Dean,
let me answer it. Dean's like, well, my wife is going to be in the Olympics. Whatever
my
event
wife
that she
loves
is
rhythmic gymnastics. So I also.
Hey man, I'm just gonna flat out brag. I'm headed to Paris. My whole family's headed to Paris. My wife's been there for a month, so everything about the Olympics.
It's good to be a Linky, man. Holy cow!
Sure is.
Yeah, it really is. My boys will say the same thing, and the only thing I'll say about my wife is thank you for letting us come along for the ride and ride her coattails. Look, not because it's a soccer podcast, but you know, I was lucky enough to be the press officer for the 92 Olympic team. And I think it's been a shame that the team is, on the men's side, not been there in so long. I thought they looked great against France until, in fact, when it went off the crossbar, I said they're going to give up a goal right now. And they did. And then they kind of melted. So I don't know if they can come back or not, but I'm going to men's soccer and I'm going to women's soccer, including the semifinals for women's soccer. So that's number one. And then I would say just because my boys are big NBA fans, seeing the men's and women's basketball teams. But look, we're doing it all, man. I'm definitely going to break now. We're doing tennis. We're doing golf. We're doing equestrian. We're doing fencing. We're doing table tennis. We're doing beach volleyball. We got tickets to all that stuff. I mean, it's going to be off the chains.
Dude, you just came back from Europe like 2 days ago. Now you're going back for another vacation.
I am petitioning for Dean Linky to adopt me as one of his family members so that I can too partake in the fun
Doug
things
Linky's
like
got a nice ring to it.
Doug Linky. That's true. So Dean, as always, has not given us a definitive answer, but that's all right.
Man, soccer. I'm soccer.
Soccer.
Yeah.
All right. I agree with you. The men I thought looked really good. They got two winnable games. They can get out of the group if they play that well. Ashley, Willis, what do you got?
Not equestrian, like Dean just mentioned as well. Swimming and gymnastics always.
Okay.
Outside of soccer, it's always swimming and gymnastics and a little bit of water polo. I always get into it.
I need to articulate these questions better because I said the one event.
Okay, fine. I picked me.
Okay. Thank you.
That was 37 sports less than Dean just mentioned.
I just said what all I'm going to. I definitively said soccer right off the bat.
Okay. All right. So Dean soccer, Ashley swimming. Okay, great. Swimming is cruel and unusual punishment, by the way. And the people that swim like the 1,500 meter, whatever, that is.
Gigi Ledecky is just going to be out of frame the entire Olympics. That's how much she's going to kill everyone. And it's amazing.
One of the things I think is craziest about swimming is you go to practice and you swim 5 hours in a row per day to be a 50-meter sprint swimmer. I don't get that. It's wild to me. All right, Christian, it's Bracken Brainbuster. So if I want to have some comments, I just take that opportunity. Christian, what do you think?
You're going to have some comments because I'm going to start by saying, to directly answer your question, I'm going to say gymnastics because I think what those athletes do is unbelievable.
All right, my answer is track and field. I just love track and field, specifically the running events. I'm not sure about shot put and high jump and all that stuff. But
Did you get any advantage with the drone scouting track and field?
I don't think so. I think it's just mano
I
a
think it's
mano.
just like, hey man, he ran fast again today. Okay,
that's
note
right.
that.
That's right. So I'm going to go track and field, which I think happens the second part of the Olympics, right? Swimming's first, swimming and gymnastics first, then the track and field at the end. So I'll have to wait. But
I will say the best part of all the Olympics is the medal count. I do like watching the medal count.
Yeah.
Who's going to win the medal
We
count.
just
and by the
kick
way,
everybody's ass, just annihilate everybody.
Here's a question. Because I always have the overall medal count, and I'm like, no. It's a gold medal count.
That's right.
What do you think about that? Is you overall count or gold medal count?
Gold medal. Gold medal. Gold medal count.
Yeah.
And we just annihilate everybody in the Summer Olympics. And it makes me feel proud to be an American.
It's interesting, Doug, that you knew kind of how like soccer starts early and the track comes later. After our team got eliminated, that 92 team was a really good team. They should have gotten out of that group. It was all under 23. There was no wild cards. And, we had Lawless and Jones and Frito. We were loaded. And Lothar bent Steve Snow. We didn't make it. Anyway, when it was done, they said, you can either stay or go home. And I said, I'll stay. And they assigned me to track and field. And my job was to be the runner for the track and field sideline reporter, who happened to be a guy who passed away recently named Orenthal James Simpson.
What? Wow.
That's opening a can of worms right there.
Yeah. Wow.
I believe we have, and Ashley, you might give us the stats. We have ECNL alumni a lot playing with the American women who look really, really good. And then we have, I believe, 5 or 6 other countries represented by ECNL alum on the girls' side. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the captain of the men's Olympic team is a player from an ECNL club.
Yeah, he's not an ECNL alum, but he came from one of our clubs.
Yeah, who's that club? Was it Alabama FC?
Alabama FC, and then we have 4 countries, 20 players on the girls' side.
So kudos to all those players. We should recognize them. And the men's captain didn't play in the ECNL, but a kudos to Alabama FC. I'm sure that they're proud of him and the path he went on. And, we're cheering for all those guys. And hopefully the women can come back with a gold medal here. And again, they look really good in moments. If the women perform like that and they look very free, very sort of confident and dynamic, if they perform and the standard for them is tough because it's always gold medal or bust. But if they can do that, and if the men get out of their group and make some noise, you're going to have a changing narrative about everything in American soccer here. That'd be nice. It'd be nice for us to see the American soccer teams do well in the Olympics. It's been a while on the men's side that they've been there, but that would be really cool. And as we said, soccer anywhere is good for soccer everywhere.
Indeed. Speaking of good, if not great, another great show of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast featuring Christian Labers, Doug Bracken, and Ashley Willis. My name's Dean Linke. We'll see you in 2 weeks for another edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast. Thank you for listening to Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast. And remember, if you have a question that you want answered on Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, email us at info@theecnl.com.